Hey guys, I'm Mike, and I definitely did not envy the Duffer Brothers during the build-up to Stranger Things Season 2. Can you imagine the pressure they had to feel to make a satisfying follow-up to such a beloved hit? I mean, it was my favorite show of 2016. Anyway, fortunately for them, they avoided the sophomore slump by taking a lesson from one of the greatest sequels ever, Aliens. James Cameron built on the success of Ridley Scott's Alien by changing literally everything from the scale of the story to the genre of the movie, and the Duffers used the same lessons to up the ante with Stranger Things 2. So let's take a closer, spoiler-filled look at how Aliens helped Stranger Things build a bigger world. Starting with more monsters. The first Alien was just one xenomorph against a crew of terrified space truckers, similar to how our Stranger Things heroes had their hands full with just a single Demogorgon. Cameron, though, needed to raise the stakes for Aliens, so he dreamed up an army of swarming xenomorphs to raise hell on LV-426.
Coming out of the goddamn wall!
Just like how in Season 2, the Duffers unleashed packs of snarling demo dogs on the town of Hawkins. Increasing the monster count allows for a lot more action and keeps the sequel from treading too much familiar ground, but it does come at a cost. We can all agree that part of the mystique of the original Xenomorph was how seemingly unstoppable it was. Ripley couldn't even kill it directly. She had to just stay alive enough to just blast it out of an airlock. But the Xenomorphs got nerfed hard in Aliens. They certainly got their fill of Space Marines, don't get me wrong, but drones are exploding left and right in this movie, and the acid blood only seems to matter when the script remembers it. In the first season of Stranger Things, the Demogorgon was an unkillable menace. I mean, it took 3 teens, a house full of traps to slightly wound it. But the demo dogs aren't too much of a problem, at least if you're a main character. I mean, Steve is smashing their heads in like he's Gallagher, and in the climactic scene, Hopper just keeps on blowing them away with a shotgun. They're still effective, but they're not quite as scary as a single slimy Demogorgon played by a man in a rubber suit. Speaking of which, special effects can also suffer when things get bigger. H.R. Geiger created a meticulously detailed suit for a xenomorph, and Ridley Scott hid it away in the darkness to let your imagination fill in the terrifying details. But there were way too many Xenos and aliens to get that kind of treatment. So Cameron mostly used performers in black spandex with alien armor glued on. In Stranger Things Season 1, one of the Duffers' main goals was to create a memorable monster out of real practical effects, and they definitely achieved it. But in Season 2, I'm seeing a lot more CGI. Here's the thing though, you know how slasher movies get really old by the 5th or so sequel? That's because the stakes never really change. It's always the same monster killing the same clueless teens. Most slashers just aren't scary after you've seen them so many times. You know the monster's gonna come alive, and you know the teens are gonna die. There's nothing really at stake outside of their own lives. That's why adding more action is such a brilliant move. You can't just have Will and the gang get menaced by another Demogorgon or even another singular monster like it. Instead, the Duffers successfully pivoted away from low-key horror to apocalyptic action. And since the bigger scale required a vastly bigger threat, that requires a lot more world building. In Alien, we know almost nothing about the xenomorph. It came from an egg in an ancient spacecraft, hatched into a wriggly worm of death, and grew into a drooling killer. For Aliens, Cameron expanded on Scott and Geiger's original concept by introducing a single monstrous queen that controlled her army of mindless drones. Meanwhile, in Stranger Things, the Demogorgon was a total mystery. They literally knew nothing about it. They had to use Dungeons and Dragons terminology to equate what it does.
The Demogorgon is tired of your silly human bickering!
Right? I mean, the season finished without any real answers on what it was, where it came from, or what it wanted. That would have worked just fine as the end of a standalone series, but the sequel definitely needed to do more on the mythology to keep us coming back.
I still feel it.
So we find out about the Mind Flayer, the giant tentacled organism that controls all life in the Upside Down, not unlike the hive mind dominated by the Xenomorph Queen.
The shadow monster's inside everything, and if the vines feel something like pain, then so does Will's, the hive mind.
Hive mind?
A collective consciousness. It's a superorganism.
And this is the thing that controls everything.
Not only that, we learned its purpose, to spread and conquer all of us inferior beings in the real world. At least according to the kids and their monster manual, which is...
The Mind Flayer.
What?
Oh my God, none of this is real. This is a kid's game.
No, it's a manual.
It's not just the scope of the story that increased, it's the consequences for failure. Alien and Season 1 of Stranger Things were about isolated humans fighting for survival. Our heroes would lose their lives, but the whole world would continue, to keep on turning. Both sequels transform the struggle into a battle for the species of humanity itself. In Stranger Things 2, the fate of our entire dimension is at stake, not just Will and the gang. It's like how in Aliens, the humans and xenomorphs are battling for control of the space colony, while another faction wants to unleash them as a bioweapon. Speaking of which, we learn more about the evil corporation in Aliens 2. In the first movie, it's only referred to in passing as the Company, but the sequel lets us in on how powerful Weyland-Yutani actually is, and how they'll stop at nothing to cash in on the xenomorphs.
Look, those 2 specimens are worth millions to the bioweapons division, right? Now, if you're smart, we can both come out of as heroes, and we will be set up for life.
Just like how in Stranger Things 2 shed more light on the government scientists who are trying to understand and exploit the Upside Down.
But imagine for a moment if a foreign state, let's say the Soviets, if they heard about our mistake. Do you think they would even consider that a mistake? What if they tried to replicate that?
Because, let's be serious, we can't let the Ruskies have it.
I can no longer sit back and allow communist infiltration to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
The expanded scope opens up tons of awesome news story possibilities.
Number 8. Number 8. Number 8.
As the series grows from a standalone surprise hit to a genuine franchise, it needs to flesh out its backstory and expand upon the world it created. And with at least 2 more seasons of Stranger Things planned, the Duffers have successfully used Aliens as a blueprint to build a much larger stage for their story to play out on. Sticking so close to Cameron's masterpiece also set up a lot of opportunities for subversion. There are plenty of smaller nods to Aliens that don't necessarily tie into the big picture, like the way Hopper gets sucked into the tunnel floor like a colonist cocooned to the wall, 11 takes an elevator down for the final showdown with the big boss, or how a team of gung-ho sci-fi soldiers get eaten alive as their superiors watch on TV. They might not tie into the greater narrative themes themselves, but there's such cool, iconic moments in action cinema, why not throw them in? It solidifies the connection, and it sets us up for some great subversions when things stray from the Aliens formula. Case in point, Dr. Owens. It's clear that the Duffers definitely cast Paul Reiser based on his iconic role as the sleazy corporate scumbag Burke in Aliens.
Wrong. It was a bad call, Ripley. It was a bad call.
Bad call.
Right.
These people are dead, Burke!
I mean, in their original script, the character was literally named Paul Reiser.
And those were your words!
So during my entire binge, I just kept on sitting there waiting, just waiting for him to turn heel, betray our heroes, and die in a suitably ironic manner, just like Burke. So imagine my surprise when he actually turns out to be a decent guy.
And if it kills the boy?
Then quite frankly, Sam, it kills him.
Say that to me again.
Sure, he's still working for the evil lab exploiting the Upside Down, but he stands up for Will and tries his best to save him. He even survives the night and gives 11 a birth certificate, which is like the nicest thing ever. Hopper gets to be her dad. I want Hopper to be my dad. The Duffers built up our expectations with their Aliens homage and their self-aware casting of Paul Reiser, which made it such a pleasant surprise when they kept Dr. Owens on the side of the good guys. But that's just what the Duffers do though. They get you in the door with some clever references and 80s nostalgia, create a satisfying story built on the foundations of those who came before them, and throw in that little extra twist that makes Stranger Things so special. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. We dove deep into one Stranger Things Season 2 reference here, but the new season had plenty. I personally love how Hopper now always goes out of his way to hang on to his hat just like Indiana Jones. What were some of your favorite references of Season 2? Leave a comment below, and if you guys like to see more content like this, please subscribe to Now This Nerd.